It's Saturday, September 6th, and our tropical weather just took a big turn. And it's actually kind of a good turn for our friends out here in the Atlantic. This invest was expected to become Tropical Storm Gabrielle and even potentially Hurricane Gabrielle, but it has seen a very large downtrend all the way to a 60% chance of formation, where yesterday it was in that 80 to 90% chance of formation range. Very rarely do we see a storm get downgraded like this, or at least an invest get downgraded like this, but it is a reminder that it can still happen, and we really have to stay weather aware. And the main culprit for this big downtrend is a big blotch of drier air brought by a big cloud of Saharan dust over our invest right here, really hindering its ability to develop. Now, just because we've seen this downtrend doesn't mean that it won't still develop. So we still want to keep our eyes close on this invest that could potentially become Tropical Storm Gabrielle. But as of right now, it is on the downtrend. So that's definitely good news. And then a lot of our computer models are predicting the same thing. Here are the European model ensembles, and we can see a lot more scarce ensembles than we did see yesterday. Yesterday was pretty much this entire sector was covered with ensembles. Now it's a bit more sparse, and we can actually see a lot of our ensembles kind of cut off before they even reach the Lesser Antilles, really showing that we're not expecting to see as much development as we once were yesterday. So even the computer models are on board with this. And here's an update on major category 4 Hurricane Kiko out here in the Pacific Ocean. It did successfully complete a eye wall replacement cycle, and now it's back to looking like a beautiful, very organized major hurricane with that big, defined, perfect eye that we usually do see with these big, strong storms. And then more good news about this is that it's currently expected to possibly skirt a little bit north of Hawaii, but still stay weather aware in Hawaii for some potential tropical storm impacts in the future. And then for our severe weather outlook today, we actually have a decent risk out here. It's going to be very skinny, but it does cover a pretty large area coming all the way from northeastern Georgia to pretty much the northeastern tip of the United States in Maine. Our main area to look for is going to be in this site risk, stretching all the way from parts of southeastern Pennsylvania all the way up to the southeastern corner of Maine. It's going to be very skinny, but this is going to be the main area to watch. Then this big marginal risk, which stretches down that entire area I just mentioned. And there is actually going to be that main threat for some 60 to potentially 65 to 70 mile an hour damaging gusts today, with that main risk being in our slight risk area, highlighted by that 15% chance risk. And then there is also going to be a pretty small chance of some hail today. We don't normally see big hail out here on the East Coast, and that trend is expected to prevail. Not really like expecting to see any hail over 1 to 1.5 inches today. And then there is actually a tornado risk today centered on this area up here in parts of Pennsylvania all the way up to that southeastern corner of Maine. So most of our slight risk for potentially some weak spin-up tornadoes. And then what's bringing our risk of severe weather is going to be a big jet stream stretching pretty deep into the US, even the southeast, and it's also going to bring some cool temperatures with it as well. Now, the coldest temperatures are going to be, of course, be up here in the far northern US. I'm talking Michigan, Minnesota, North Dakota, and the Michigan Peninsula. Potentially seeing some mid-50s feels like temperatures today. Now, for the rest of the US, we're going to have a couple of cold spots, one covering most of New York and another skinny one stretching all the way from southern Arkansas all the way up until West Virginia. Likely seeing some mid-50s to mid-60s in those cold spots, but for the rest of the country, which isn't the Gulf Coast and the Eastern Coast, you're going to be seeing some pretty stellar weather today, temperature-wise, likely in that low 70s to mid-60s feels like range. But unfortunately, if you are down here in the Gulf Coast and Eastern Coast, you're going to be experiencing some pretty hot temperatures, likely in that mid to high 90s feels like range. Then our flood risk today is going to be pretty low. We have a couple of marginal risk, one up here in our slight risk area for severe weather, another one in southern and central Florida, then another big one stretching all the way from the southwest into parts of eastern Oregon. All these marginal risk would be for that threat of 1 to 2 inches of rain. So really nothing super crazy, but still stay weather aware if you're in any of these risks. And here's what the radar could look like as we go later into the day. We're going to see our first batch of some strong severe storms likely initiated on the western side of our site risk area at around midday. These storms would likely get their act together pretty quickly and they'd be in a more linear mode. Now, these are mostly going to be initiated by a cold front, and then, of course, that big trough with that big, strong jet stream pushing through, bringing a lot of forcing for these storms being one of the reasons for that linear mode. And then these storms will likely continue bringing that severe risk of some strong storms all the way until the evening hours when they really start to lose their steam. And then taking a peek a bit more south in the mid-Atlantic and southeast, we're going to still see that risk of severe weather, although it's going to be a bit more scarce and our storms are going to be a bit more sparse. So not as much storm coverage, but still likely a good line of storms along that cold front. And then, of course, that big trough pushing through. And then here is that big trough pushing through that's bringing most of our severe weather today, bringing loads of forcing to our slight and marginal risk areas today. We can really see a very, very strong jet stream, which we don't normally see this time of year. So this is something more rare, but it's definitely a very strong jet stream bringing a lot of forcing and really forcing up those storms and kind of making them initiate. Then here's that storm environment in our main risk area today up here in parts of the northeast. The main things that we're going to notice is that it's going to be a moist environment, 71 dew point, and then definitely unstable enough around a 2300 cape range. And then our 3 cape is also going to be pretty high, over 100, and that would actually increase that chance of a couple of spin up tornadoes having that higher 3 cape. Other things for tornadoes are going to be a low enough cloud basis, definitely low enough some curvature in our photograph, and then our shear and helicity in the low levels are going to be very favorable for that spin up tornado risk. And then for our bulk or organizing shear, we're going to have some really, really solid organizing shear at around 53 knots, and then that's going to have some wind veering to go along with it. So we're looking at some very organized storms today. So definitely bringing that threat of some small hail in that 1 to 1.5 inch range, and then some isolated severe gusts, likely being in that 60 to 70 mile an hour range. And then also definitely that threat of some spin up tornadoes along this line of thunderstorms. I actually do think we could see a pretty significant threat of some spin up tornadoes along this line in this specific region up here in the northeast. And then for the rest of our marginal risk area, excluding that northeastern specific region, it's going to be a lot of the same stuff, but minus the tornado ingredients. We're still going to have that 71 dew point moist atmosphere. It's actually going to be a bit more unstable in these areas that are not immediately along that northeastern region. And it's going to likely be over 3,000 cape. And then our 3 cape is going to be nearing 200, so super high, also making that chance of tornadoes non-zero, but it's going to be super low in these areas because our shear is just not going to be there for that risk to happen. Other things to note are that we do have a bit of dry air loft, and then we also have a really high precipitable water at around 1.7 inches. So it looks like the main threat for areas which aren't directly in the northeastern area where shear parameters are going to be a bit worse, it's likely just going to be a 60 mile an hour damaging wind threat and potentially some hail around 1 inch in diameter for everybody else in that marginal risk.